The rickety old space bus rattled as it pierced through Tarvasia's swirling emerald atmosphere. Frank gripped his seat as the bus pitched and yawed, his heart racing. Despite making this treacherous atmospheric entry countless times before in his travels, this particular planet filled him with dread. As the lone human passenger, Frank drew a few curious glances from the feathered Tarvasians seated around him. He offered polite smiles in return, though his stomach churned with anxiety that threatened to override his traveler's facade. Frank was en route to Cryala, the capital city of Tarvasia, on a special assignment for the Galactic Tribune. As the Tribune's first human journalist granted access to Tarvasia in over a decade, he knew he was heading into hostile territory. Ever since the end of the human, Tarvasian conflict, 2 decades prior, anti-human propaganda had continued raging across this avian, dominated planet. With today marking the 20-year anniversary of that fateful war's conclusion, Frank was here to walk straight into the dragon's den, to report on the tensions still simmering from both sides. The bus lurched as it landed roughly on the Cryala spaceport tarmac. The Tarvasian passengers rose, gathering travel bags and squawking farewells to each other. Frank stepped off the bus into the bustling crowds of the terminal. Towering aliens shuffled by, their sharp eyes following the lone human, dragging his small carry-on bag behind him. Frank checked the directory, then pushed his way through the aggressive avian throngs toward the Governmental Media Relations Center on the far side of the spaceport. He stepped into a soaring atrium with tall crystalline spires that cast rainbow shards of light over clusters of feathered administrators milling about. Making his way to an intake desk, Frank produced his credentials. "I'm Frank Arbor, the reporter sent by the Galactic Tribune." The elder Tarvasian official ruffled his crimson feathers in surprise. No human has set foot on Tarvasia since the war. This must be some kind of deception. He examined Frank's documents, clucking skeptically with his scaly beak. "I assure you, I'm here on a diplomatic mission to cover the 20th anniversary. Strictly as a journalist," Frank pressed calmly. "The tribunal hopes improved media relations may help relations between our peoples." The Tarvasians conferred in low, warbling tones, peering sharply at Frank's credentials and travel documents. Finally, the elder admin thrust a media badge toward Frank in his clawed grasp. "We shall allow the access, but do not believe you will spread your vile human propaganda here," he squawked angrily. The other officials bristled, hissing under their breath. Frank nodded, taking the badge delicately to avoid touching the alien's gnarled talons. "I seek only truth and understanding." He received his temporary housing assignment and directions to the archives in the Hall of Justice. Passing more glaring officials, he was acutely aware of his vulnerability as the lone human here. Routinely harassed or even attacked in the streets, he would be putting his life at risk even just walking outside. Frank steeled himself with the courage of his mission. As a journalist, the truth was worth fighting for, now more than ever. Over the next couple days, Frank dug extensively into records within the Hall of Justice. He read Tarvasian accounts of the entire human, Tarvasian conflict, compiling an outline for his in-depth anniversary piece in the Tribune. The Tarvasian narrative was just as biased as Frank expected, painting humans as the ultimate aggressors while playing the victim. As the popular account went, humans were an invasion force, aggressively expanding their colonies further into Tarvasian territory. Despite desperate diplomatic pleas, the humans had refused to halt their advancement, determined to seize the rich mineral resources on Tarvasia's fourth moon for themselves. So the peaceful Tarvasians had been left with no choice but to defend their territory. After humans established an illegal mining colony on Tarvasia IV, Tarvasian armed forces moved to intervene, but they had fallen victim to a surprise human military assault instead. The first strike in what became a long, bloody conflict, claiming countless Tarvasian lives over the following years. It was undeniable from the records that the Tarvasians had ultimately repelled the human fleet after years of tireless sacrifice. Triumphant cries across the planet still commemorated that victory to this day. While a tenuous ceasefire had held for the past 2 decades, anti-human sentiment simmered higher than ever. However, as Frank analyzed ship logs, battle reports, and mining permits from those fateful years preceding war, he began noticing contradictory gaps. Huge swaths of sensor data from Tarvasian patrol ships were missing. Certified colony permits proved humans had settled Tarvasia illegally over a year before conflict broke out. Casualty numbers were also inconsistent. Estimated human deaths outnumbered Tarvasian ones by nearly 6-fold. How could such staggering losses be consistent with a human sneak attack? Frank brought his findings directly to the Hall administrators. Your records indicate highly aggressive Tarvasian fleet movements preceded major battles, not defensive maneuvers, and proportionally more humans perished. He lifted his eyes. I must ask again, who fired first? The feathered officials glared back, fluttering their wings angrily. Lies and transparent ploys. Our patrol fleet pursued illegal human ships into the Tarvasia system. They opened fire first after we cornered them. Frank frowned. Then why are so many sensor logs missing? The elders averted his gaze. Technical issues. Networks crashed accidentally. Their lies trailed off into guttural avian murmurs. Realizing he would get nowhere with authorities clinging desperately to their xenophobic propaganda, Frank changed strategies. He compiled his research into an objective by-side analysis piece, examining both historical accounts without bias. He then went directly to the Tarvasian citizens of Krayala themselves, spreading his articles through the crowded central markets. See both sides. Read the hidden truth of your past. He implored passersby from his modest booth tucked between food stalls. Many Tarvasians initially hurled angry insults, accusing Frank of fabrication. But crowds nonetheless gathered, intrigued that a lone human would risk his safety coming here. As individuals read, Frank's research presenting conflicting war facts from both human and Tarvasian sources. Shock debates broke out across the city. Was it possible their leaders had deceived them about the past? If Tarvasian ships had struck first in a greedy bid to control more territory, who were the true aggressors? Passionate arguments flooded government forums demanding explanation. Elders held emergency sessions to address the brewing peer crisis, casting blame upon Frank and his disruptive muckraking. 3 days later, Tarvasian police marched Frank out of his shabby apartment without warning. He clutched his invaluable notes close as they dragged him back to governmental headquarters. This was it. He would finally be forcibly expelled for revealing too many inconvenient truths, or even imprisoned and made to disappear under opaque security protocols. Yet to Frank's surprise, he was instead escorted to the towering central justice spire and brought before the High Tribunal Council itself. The great elders lined the circular chamber, peering down from on high with smoldering eyes as Frank was shoved into the central defendant box. You have sown instability and unrest through your false words. Human, the prime elder thundered. Our citizens now refuse to believe our account of war origins. What possible gains drive your seditious revisionism? Truth alone, your honors, Frank said evenly, meeting each judge's glare in turn. The peoples of this galaxy cannot move forward and resolve our bloody histories if we do not acknowledge past wrongs honestly. Whatever the wars start, too many lost their lives. The lead judge slammed down his gavel. The human makes a fair point, he squawked reluctantly. Our aura of infallibility has cracked. Citizens are questioning why we resist a more transparent retelling. He turned to the other elders. Perhaps certain truths were avoided to spare pain or pride, but we only deepen divides by denying the dead respect. Let our memorials reflect history fully, not excuses. One by one, the tribunal dipped their feathered crests in acquiescence. The prime elder peered down at Frank, clicking his curved beak slowly in contemplation. Human. Frank, perhaps your people have shown more willingness for truth than we credited, he rasped, tasting the words as if for the first time. If past wrongs are acknowledged freely by all, our children may finally know reconciliation. He raised a clawed hand. On behalf of the Tarvasian people, I rescind your travel ban. Any who seek interstellar unity are welcome here. As Frank left Tarvasia days later, he glimpsed a massive memorial statue being dismantled in Kriala's central square, ready to be replaced at last with a monument representing unvarnished history. He boarded his shuttle with newfound hope that even the coldest hearts could change when confronted with truth, no matter how painful. This was only the beginning.